When I feed the dogs, I like to have them loose because they work together, they eat together, and creates a bond amongst the dogs. When we cut up dog food in the larger chunks, the stronger dogs will eat more, whereas the weaker dogs will eat less. So I try to split the food in a way that everyone gets a chance. When they're working, I feed them every day when I can. That way, they get the reward, they get the energy, they do the work that we ask them to do. They have to be healthy, they have to be strong, they have to be running, they have to be working with you. When I was young, Inuit totally depended on the dogs for survival, for food and transportation. And then there was a time when dogs almost disappeared.
Between 1950 and 1970, the Inuit of Arctic Canada lost their semi-nomadic way of life. They moved into settled communities. The sled dogs, their trusted companions, almost vanished. Their numbers went from many thousand to a few hundred. Many Inuit still believe their dogs were deliberately killed by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police as part of a government policy to force them off the land. But how could this have happened? It's a mystery and a controversy that has left deep wounds across Canada's Arctic.
I've never heard such crap in my life.
I
don't want to go to my grave with that on my record.
Okay, sir, I'll ask you if you want to be sworn in by putting your hand on the Bible.
The Qimmit Truth Commission is holding public hearings, inviting everyone to speak up.
Thank you. I just want to say that the sorrow you feel and the guilt that you have expressed for not having acted is probably not something you could have controlled at that time. But we have to give Canada some understanding and appreciation of what went through. And so adding your voice to the voices of many people in Qimmit region And hearing people respectfully is how we get the truth out and how we tell this story. So we're very happy that you came by, as difficult it is to talk about those times. Qimmit.
The Truth Commission will spend 2 years on its quest for answers. It'll visit every community in the Eastern Arctic. It was established and paid for by the Inuit because the Canadian government wants nothing to do with the issue, and the RCMP denies any wrongdoing.
Yaktoro ngikaruaktunga kisiana atartaga kun annam nagotillage arumma ilumun ubagutamatta aqiksugia qappugut angayuqqaagituinnangitavu qimmeqaq tam angayuqqa ubaguttau angayuqqaun aksua annorjuarsimayuit ilinniagaartutau nasuktilluta ilaanneqqiayut tamajjaavalaumata immaqa qitungattinnutaanna naksartimmiyavut ujjiringi kalwarluta.
Turn the music down! I've always wanted to work with them just because, you know, they need, it's not supposed to be a jail for them, it's supposed to be a place for improvement. We have kids here that we see that sometimes we have to kick them out because they have problems with themselves and they're continuously bringing it back here, and we know it comes from the home, and we might even kind of know the history of the parents, and you know it's not their fault. Obviously it's more common in Inuit because of the social problems that we have from everything that happened to Inuit, from the dog slaughter to the relocations to the E numbers and the residential schools. It's obvious a lot of those people are really angered and frustrated, and it might be the reason why some of these kids have parents that are sometimes, you know, can't just always be parents because of so much hurt. People my age are busy with their lives. They usually don't ask a lot of questions about our past. But this question about losing the dogs is disturbing. I can find out more from my grandpa who lives in Panluktu. All my life he has been very important to me. My grandpa is the smartest guy I know, the smartest person I know. He's been through so much. When I go back to seeing the things he did growing up, it's true, he's so smart and he's an incredible man. He's always got to be making things or fixing things to keep himself occupied. Like, he knows so much, like with keeping track of the weather for the past 50 years. And he doesn't need to, he just does it because for himself.
Qimmit atausa tainna fiatuagallugu qimmikatunilaarsumayakkalaima laimiki kakkimma nuliaqi qigittaqaaliaqaarortillugi qimmikatunilaarsumaakki qimmigisukkuuluagallugi nalligillugi taavungaqasungusumati qigittaqluama tainna atausa sarliartuni atausammi arnalukaulluni kinguvaaliuqunnanga Sanguya silatettiinni qukeaqpalataavi tusalaarsumaga ungasippaluгuni sunaqqapaliisikkuangayuqqaangan taissuminga qimmiliortissatuattiaqalertanni qukersilaarsimamma tainnalu qitunganga arnalukaugani angutiulluni kinguvaaliuqunnagani ajornarsikallalaarsimagu qimmeqarniaqaaqani
Palisili qanu ilinneqqiu
Falisi anigama qukeaqpalamma kuniartuq taununga assivittinnu atsivivu Tamang kaingumulla siva payuutta. Tauna ngofattugu sarleangunagaakku uppingittialaorsimamman. Kisani iviangingi makatikkakki uppulilaorsimamman. Sarleanguningani. Taima oqorigakku tamanna qukassutigiqataartani taatti kukiu uvanno tunisimalilorsimagaroonnugu. Kisani piyumalaorsimammanakku.
Qimmit piaqauttilugi inuuqatitaaravaliasi pijaqiuqsisiaqattalaujujavut allaataanna Qimmit pillarialuigattigu aqqaani aqqataka nunami hawajimaqutituavulla kannaqama ai iltsimaqutituavullumimu ai laqqauqama nunama hawajimajualuuna aqqauqama liqaqannaqama Qimmit aqqaaguloortum tiitoqajaqpivinu minnalla aulajibun luqqaqasupalauqqut ikungai yakkan aku mena nuqqaqatuttu tiituqqivini vunna imaqavimatsialauju illumigaq ikkanippoq lagunnasuttillu uumajuqsigajaqata uumajuqsiutiqutitlaqinaujuattigu takkuni ujaqajaqtin tikkanimmaq dasitunnapulamujaqingaqmigu natsisiutsaqajaquma aqikkisiutsaqa suna uumajuqsiutsaqajaqum ikkanimmaq dasitunnapulamujut media kalauta anita ulu tchela uje bogot piut tchia btai media kalata walummata tagaila kitchau kata tagitchau kuluni anga ju kitchau kuluni lakka tukutalo ya rawi mutachman anni tchela uje watta anni tuktu agalo uje watta tuchi malang madlat ilabut tuku ya rawi mutatachmani laka anga ju kimaga de piut tcheka Media wild trimata. I need to plan a load of wood.
Many RCMP members are angry at the Inuit stories, but we still try to talk about it to keep the door open to common understanding, a reconciliation.
There's a lot of discussion. Sometimes there's anger at the allegations. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding. There's a miscommunication within the ranks. And other times people just say, let's just forget about it and provide the police service that the community desires and needs. From my perspective, it's good to discuss it.
Many Inuit have joined the RCMP since these things happened. They know about these events, even if their interpretation may be different.
I've never witnessed slaying of dogs just for the sake of slaying. I can only relate to stories that I've heard. Communities are forming in the early 60s, 70s. Camps are moving into bigger centers such as Clyde River or Qimmit, and the dogs are loose. And people had to learn how to deal with loose dogs within the community. They're hungry. They're next thing to the wild wolf.
Our family's dogs disappeared after we moved into the settlement of Clyde River. I was just a boy, so I don't remember any details. Many Mounties who served in the Arctic in those days have retired to the Okanagan Valley. Once a month, they get together for coffee.
My name is Joelie, Sanguya. I'm from Clyde River. Welcome to this session. If you were to tell the commission exactly how you feel about this, what will you say?
When the news came out in the newspapers, headlines right across the land, it just said that Mounties in the north are accused of slaughtering 20,000 Inuit sled dogs. Well, that's a kind of like a blanket over everybody that was there.
These men spent the best years of their lives in the north. The way they see it, they're innocent until proven guilty.
When I hear about the accusations of us slaughtering a dog, it really hurts me because that's not the way we operate. We may have had the odd person up there from time to time that kicked over the rails. He didn't do his job. Those guys didn't come back north when they went out. They served their time maybe, or maybe just part of it, and we weeded them out.
In the Western Arctic, we used to shoot dogs if they had distemper or wild or loose or something. But it was never the intention that people were going to be forced off the land by shooting their dogs. I never saw that written anywhere.
To say that there was a policy by the force to go out and shoot the dogs, to make the people move into town, to go to school, is absolutely fabrication or misunderstanding, miscommunication.
I've never heard of this ever happening to anywhere that I was and with anybody that I knew. And that's all I can do. But I'm under the blanket because I've been accused as being in the north in that time, so therefore I'm one of the ones that slaughtered all these dogs. And I object to that. I really do. I don't want to go to my grave with that on my record.
Memories clash. People say opposite things. When it comes to how the dogs were killed and why, it's like there are two different truths. Inuit tell stories, white people write papers. Frank Tester has hundreds of documents about the dogs. But even if something is on paper, doesn't mean it's true.
I don't claim that the archival records tell everything, and I don't even claim that they tell the truth. They definitely don't. What they do is they give the perception, they give some idea of how the non-Inuit authorities, whether it's the RCMP or social workers or nurses or doctors or, whoever, fill in the blank. It's their perception of what was going on. It's their record of what was going on.
The Mounties who came north were very young. They knew little of the history of how white people before them had come to dominate the Inuit. To the Inuit, the white man, any white man, was boss. By law, the young Mounties were responsible for keeping every Arctic settlement safe. There was a so-called dog ordinance that mandated them to detain or destroy any loose dogs within or near a settlement, or even sled dogs in harness, unless the owner was right there. But exactly how that law was applied depends on who you talk to.
My name is Matimune Michael, and I used to have E number with E71454. Sila 13 udah kama. Atatagalo si Bakneo Tillono. Pukat tali kailok sa mama. Ilago apikilone. Nung narakalakan ng nakpa. Sanego lang ayut sa ulusi. Asulas aulakan no. Tana palisi sa kuki umilus sakpukaw ti alamalu po kamalu tatatto. Siya siuti siuti. Ukakawjitsune. Ang ayokangay ukaw tinakasiyo. Ukaw tinakay ang ayokangay. Kimisi tukokakayali. Illu sana jawabaliya si yu Qimmit. Qimmit mugunot tilakusi.
Tapos siya ukotok tawal palisik tuno awla di bunga. Inuit akit to palyalang ang matagaw. Kamutaw dahil akit to palyalang gati. Malo sukusi ko ilinay mo ilinay balyak tagay kalagtutin. Kaya may loktaw ng nakalawa kami. Ako na ang ako nalaw sa mga ito. Kao dumalak.
matukku atatagi tipiloqsimayu qimmini qapegiartornerarsuti taaqqutuutsiangutilluta taikkoilavut nunaqqatigigasuartavut taunaniittortahangitillugit taana sorusier sakkuqautialummi kipitsigasvaqqaulugaluaru kipitsigunnaqaungatto hanwiligaanaluluamu angiaqhaangunginnama ataatagaqai angeqsimavaarsimallunga pigiaqqanerpaqanginnama hanwililausimangittungalu hanwilineriarluunni iqqaumangittunga Malikattakainalauqsamagama Qimmit tuquqattartuni haidilauqsamajunga Kingullerpaanganni qimmisigama qanimut tukuluaappisaqaleqsiummu iseqsamittu
Uvuuna hokkilauqsimana. Tautulauqsimadaqa uvuuna ammaqtu tappani. Uvuuna matumu timmikaageesimmat. Uvuuna allulauqsimaduma. Matuunalaanauqaaqtu. Aumitingilaqilauqsimaduma. Saana puikoqulmangittu. Takuminalauqsimangittu. Aumitignaasaqalauqsimangitaqataima tabbanaruqassimma.
Akirukkuagijulaakukka pisutsuti-asivaqtu qimmiqaqunniiqatta
Teininnisana.
Tuqautigumaluatiunnaki
Iya, teimau.
Only like nandiani naluruksimajuma nandiani qattavathere ulangama palisikkunni o unahokkeasimaju nallia qattavathere ogasoernagoma nallia qattavathere aregadaqqaga apekkutiga tamanna hokkealauqsulunni upalunni palisikku nallia Palisikku salluvaangittu pangataututsimananga akaungittumiiti chirvinu pumanainuusingana kunea taimaangatsimagaluagama palisikkunnu tunganaqasuatunnaqattaqtamasuli atsoa pipitsunga tunganaqasuaqqahattartuwa itumakkimeeligalortuki takkualuukkua himbiideisimajuari.
That just did not happen at that time or during any of my time in Lake Harbor, Qimmit. It's incredible, and I mean, I just can't believe it. I mean, the guy appears to be very honest. I can't doubt that, but I just, you know, and all the members I've known up there, I can't imagine somebody giving a child a gun and tell him to go shoot dogs. It just, I've never heard of that before. I'm kind of astounded by the story, and I hope that we can get to the bottom of it.
It's word against word, memories that clash, people who don't speak each other's language, lots of room for miscommunication. But all the power was in one camp, with the police.
they started shooting dogs in the 50s, and they shot quite a few. And whether dogs were shot would depend on the RCMP officer and the bylaws that were in place at the time. And some RCMP officers were not inclined to shoot dogs because they had a better appreciation than other RCMP officers of the importance of dogs to Inuit. Others didn't have that kind of insight, didn't have those kinds of relationships, and they were, I guess you could call them, trigger happy.
Frank Tester's documents tell us about the time of big changes in Nunavut. Life in traditional camps and life in the new settlements were two different things.
Well, it's a tangled story. They tell us that, well, essentially what happened is dogs were an asset. They were essential. You couldn't eat without dogs. You couldn't seal hunt without dogs. You couldn't travel without dogs. Dogs were probably one of the most important aspects of Inuit culture in the period before the 1960s. So the move into settlements takes place, and dogs become a liability in the eyes of Kaluna. I'm talking about the way in which the white folks living in these new settlements that we're developing started to see and understand dogs.
This is John. This is Mary. This is John.
In the 1960s, people are starting to think that Inuit are going to become more or less like we. That they're going to, in fact, end up with wage employment. They're going to buy their groceries in the store. They're going to get up at 8:30 in the morning and go off to work with a lunch bucket in hand. And the women are going to stay home and bake scones and clean the house and do the sewing and so forth and so on. So the attitude towards dogs changes.
She was presented with this beautiful parka made by, I think, by Elizabeth Lee. The Queen on her visit gave me a silver Dunhill lighter to even suggest that the RCMP went around deliberately destroying dogs to make sure that people couldn't get out on them. I mean, I've never heard such crap in my life.
We talked to one elder and they said that
Where was this?
In Apex.
Uh-huh.
And we were told that their dogs were tied up on their sled, ready to go that evening. And the police or whoever was in charge of killing the dogs shot the dogs while they were tied up onto the sled.
Absolutely untrue. Total fabrication.
Why do you think they're saying that?
Well, I was here. I've been here 50 years. I know the mount. I know every one of the Mounties. I knew all of these people that had dog teams. And to say that somebody would come along and deliberately shoot their bloody dogs tied up on a dog team is utter crap.
But why do you think these elders are telling people that?
They're dreaming. It's ridiculous. A lady that worked in the rehabilitation center. Her name was Paulette Anna Rudluck, and she lived here with her son, beautiful boy. And we found him dead at the bottom of the Apex Hill, and he'd been devoured, partially devoured by dogs. And so it became a big problem. We had council meeting after council meeting after council meeting. Tie up your bloody dogs. Tie up your dogs. Yeah, okay, sure. Well, they wouldn't tie them up. One day we had to go and round up. There were so many dogs after this killing. They were everywhere. They were under buildings. They were dangerous. They would attack people on the street. City bylaw officers have killed more dogs in the north than any Mountie ever. Every community, the first and only bylaw officer they ever hired was always the dog catcher, always.
Mr. Kumalik, I'd like you to put your hand on the Bible, please. Do you promise what you will say to the Truth Commission today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Angekpunga.
Thank you.
Sibulikpago kogama adik bay meuni. Kimmertiuri doksama yung paresimi angayukakaslunga. Paresimi akiktaw yun. Paresi kate makatigidlugo, kate makatigibaglugo, kate makatigilawlugo. Kimmerkukirtsa katang niyaragamago. Kimmertiuri agama. Ipiaktuutakang ituarong matakin nivertikon. Niviaksami kisaanat kisaalauklutik. Kimmit ipiutaktak ipirsimayun nakpadlaarilauktu ataatikungillutik. Ajoksaruartut samakkua kiinaalaqattaanginningit qimmingit ipirnasaartuaraortu ilangit. Kiinaalaqarningit qimmit kisaani qimmirunnarsilaortukun ipirsimmaquyaarortutaqaagutillugu kisaani.
Out on the land, when the dogs weren't working, they ran free. They stayed close to their family. They scrounged food from scraps. The law about tying up the dogs when they came into the settlement was something new.
When you were the person controlling the dogs for 5 months, as you mentioned, did you ever come across a situation where people would have been angry with you or challenged you? And is this something you took on by yourself, or were you asked to do it by the police?
Paresik kuniti ila kami sinala tamatuminga paresakakata piliralaaksimangmat tiliyaudlunga uwanga piyumaninnyunguttok taiman nakimiliriyuraaksimayunga.
Did you ever have any problems with people because you did not give them notice, or because you shot dogs that were tied on? Did you ever run into any of those kind of problems?
Kisutun ng munila piliriyudlune kimiyunguttuwaranut kuwiagayaun nangin mataysimana kimiliriyudlune kappianarninginnut Inuit kukirsituin nakasung nanga ukakkawunga ipirsiqattaraorsimayunga. Suoku ikakatuayunaak tillugit taan kukiaqartaqaruaqa kukirukku taanni inuqartuqailuni ninngaumaluni uqallangniarmingmat. Kimmiliriyudluni kappianartualuku. Akunninganinnarmat ukuaru kukirsiquliyut ukuaru piquyinngittu narianni ajornarmat kukirsinarlunilu taimanna ammataakku kappianarlutit taimanna ipirsiqattaraorsimuunguli taakkua taqqi iluanni ningautiajakkama. Angunasuutiqattaraorlutigu ipirsimatuinnarlutit ipiartuutiminillu toquvaklutit suoqaimma ipirsimaquyaungmata.
We thank you for your experience and your wisdom and your very good memory. We're very happy that you came.
Quvesukkuvungattao apestortaayumallunga isimasiungugama aperiyaurungu qallagunnarlungaruugama quyannamitsiarivungattao mamisarmigama.
I think we have to recognize that Inuit history is oral history. Inuit understanding comes from the telling and retelling of stories, and from the ability by people who do not have what I would call a crutch of writing and a pen and a pencil to mark down records, of having fabulous memories going back when some of them are quite young, and being able to recount these matters, all the more relevant, all the more useful, because of the emotional impact that they bring and the memories they bring. So I think there's a lot of value in ensuring that we accept the oral history that is being presented.
In the 1950s, the military built a chain of radar stations across the Arctic. It was called the Dew Line. Thousands of white workers came north. Many Inuit found jobs too.
The big change really came after the Dew Line. It opened up the whole north, and the government started putting their people into communities, and schools were put in, and housing was brought in. There was always a tendency to want to come into the community. Socialization, there's churches, eventually there were movies, and all those things, and then housing drew people in, and the other thing was welfare.
With the Dew Line came big changes. The government wanted the Inuit to move into the new communities that were being built. The Mounties didn't like the new direction.
I think most RCMP members think like I do, and that is that the Inuit would have been best to have been left in their home environment and bring the services, education, and health to them.
But the new way of life arrived quickly, very quickly.
It's probably one of the most interesting stories in the world. Inuit who are living in hunting camps as a hunting culture come into settlements. And so you have a phenomenal culture and social change taking place in a very short period of time. And what's really interesting is at the same time, Bombardier in 1960 patents the autoboggin, or the skidoo. What happens is the use of skidoos in the Baffin region, in fact in the entire Arctic, increases steadily throughout the 1960s.
The dogs became redundant over the Inuits' adoption of the skidoo as their transportation. And the benefit of the skidoo was that the trappers, the hunters, could go out, spend the whole day out there at the trap line or hunting, and be back in at their home in Lake Harbor at night. Under the old system with the dogs, they would go out and spend days out there and then come back.
It totally changed the way people hunted and traveled, and the flexibility that it gave you, the distances you could cover. And it didn't take long for them to catch on. The Inuit took to snowmobiles like a duck to water.
When I was a boy, our family traveled everywhere with our dog team. I was expected to have my own team when I grew up. But snowmobiles got in the way. But not so many years ago, my mother told me that my grandson, Jordan, should learn to run a team. So now we have close to 20 dogs. We used to spend the winter out here on the sea ice. Once the RCMP came to our camp.
Ano sa tinitiyagan sa tinukulusan ko kayo tinari, kini ako na ko ko doktor. Ano sa ko ruwat sa tayo at ako tao pa. Pagtatupao dito rin ko, nitiya yung ano rin yung at. Kain ko tito yung yan.
It's polar bear hunting season in the high Arctic.
Line up, mauna. Ay panga ikaw na line up.
Hunting permits are drawn in a lottery.
Narakay naiti, iman na nagsasa na ito siya. Number 1, Lali Ilaw. Kaya may nagbakang itira umata atatakun. Kapya na tiyatun. Suklo, ukakasukirwa uma atatagilaw ay uma uwanik. Ukakasukirwa uma Qimmit ka kukak sangilugi ukwa uwanga. Imakasi utima igluagon tiguyaw runga manak kamataw nung ukutitaw tuwin na kaya raktunga. Iman na kisiutitaw ngitya makarak sa mayuin. Kapyasuk kami ima kubiyoktok. Qimmit ka kukak saktaw tilugi kanukli ilakka anni matiniarak pagka isimadlo na kubiyoktok. Iglaw tigiyaw tuwin na so tisigiyaw tuwin sa kukasango kataksaw ting. Taman na anya ako tao si mayo ako nagtuagaro.
The Truth Commission is delving deep into history and traditions.
Simon, can you show us on that map over there where Talayoc is, where you were born? There, yeah, just show us. If the police were to tell you that they were only abiding by the law and they were shooting these dogs which were loose to protect people in the community, what would you say to me? What would you say to the police about that explanation?
Tan mariga. Mariga tan ukaw suriyaga. Mariga nuna bu ilwane akik simangimman. Mariga akik simangman taunane kadlona nunangani. Unago mariga akik taulok sa mayo ingalan. Tan tawang harong mariga sunyataga uwanga paano ko tumiyutaro lunga na magpa. Akit yang namang itong. Mariga akik tauyagak po kutitumi. Mariga uwan nuningang nakpasakto. Tao nang natukaro. Tamaw nga atuk tao uwat tino atuk tao na sukruni. Sukay ma pikuyak sukak sakay pabut. Maligak tama nga ngimman. Tukisakatigi kanagpukay.
It was in 1970 that I came to Hobbies to work for the government of NWT, and I was about 25 years old. And this person, who was a mechanic and maintenance person for the government, approached me and my friend to say if we can shoot dogs. So he went to the store and bought some ammunition for us. We went around the community to look for these dogs, and we found them close to the dump. They were in the pack. We managed to shoot all of them, and we went back to the community to tell the person, who was a white man, and told him that we shot all the dogs. All of them are dead now. And he came and gave us a can of 5-gallon fuel and asked us to burn the carcasses of the dogs. We're kind of scared, and we feel pretty guilty after we saw the dogs. But then we had to do it because I work for the government. This person works for the government, and it was our duty to do what he said, what the boss says, you know. There was a lot of misunderstanding. If I was the area administrator, I told you, you are Inuit, tie up your dogs or else I'll shoot them. The Inuit would say, although he doesn't understand, so he didn't tie him up because he didn't understand what the white man was saying, you know.
But he didn't want to show that he didn't understand.
He didn't want to show. He wanted to show that he understand what the white man was saying to him, you know.
So what we have are different perceptions and different accounts of what was going on, and most importantly, the question why. So, for example, I've heard the claim that the RCMP had a conscious policy of shooting dogs in order to trap people in settlements. I've listened to this, I've thought about it, and I have to be honest and say that I've never seen a document which makes this claim or which instructs the RCMP to behave in this way. And it's also counterintuitive because I have all kinds of other documents instructing the RCMP to chase people out of town to make sure that they were not becoming, quote, dependent, that they were out in their camps and making a living, and that they were hunting and trapping and trading furs with the Hudson's Bay Company.
People talk about a dog slaughter. Well, the only slaughter I know about, as so-called, was I went on holiday to Mexico and left my dog, whose name was Dog, a Newfoundland dog, huge dog. He used to appear with me when I used to sing for my supper in various clubs around town. And I went off to Mexico and left the dog with my friend Colin Alexander. One morning while I was away, he'd let the dog out for a pee. A policeman came by with a vehicle, told the dog to jump in, which he did because he'd listen to anybody. Took it to the dump and shot it. So I was pretty pissed off, to say the least. In fact, the whole community was up in arms. There were protests, they wrote letters, they wrote poetry. In fact, I got a poem somebody wrote. The Mounties always get their dog. And I came back and the dog had been skinned. Somebody got the dump, skinned it, and nailed it on a sheet of plywood. And it was outside this house in the Eskimo village, which I just ripped it off and burnt it. But it was pretty upsetting, to say the least.
The Truth Commission has arrived in the capital. Some of the people who made Arctic policy 50 years ago are still here.
You can either be sworn or be affirmed, or whatever you wish.
Sworn is fine by me.
You promise that the testimony you will give the commission today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. So it was only during the war that Canada as a country began to understand, there are people living there. There are people living there. And they're living in very difficult conditions.
The government began to send civilian administrators north in the late 1950s. Their outlook clashed with that of the Mounties.
Now, in the case of the RCMP, basically the feeling was, at that time, the feeling was that the Inuit should be not just hanging around town if they can't trade. They should be out in the camps. We did not feel that way. We had discussions with the police, and we said, look, you can't do it that way. You can't just say to people, you can't be in town because you can't hunt or you can't fish. They're Canadians. They're free.
Far removed from the Arctic, some Ottawa civil servants had grand visions.
Where do you draw the line between racism and paternalism? When I first entered the service, I was invited to join a committee. What they were talking about was relocating the whole Inuit population, East, Central, and Eastern Arctic, in stages into a large institutions north of Winnipeg, what was then called an insane asylum. The Inuit would there be staged and trained and put through transition exercise for absorption and assimilation into the body politic of Canada down in the south, which in effect would have depopulated the Arctic. Needless to say, that exercise didn't last very long, but it was very seriously talked about. Much later, I guess the Americans were practicing up in our Arctic with simulated A-bombs. There were huge flashes in the sky. The Inuit would see these things going on, and they were frightened. They didn't know what was going on. Nobody explained anything to them. And when Gordon Robertson was asked why this wasn't reported, why this wasn't explained, why the Inuit people were not reassured about what was going on, if reassurance was possible, and his response was, their language is so primitive we cannot communicate with them. No kidding.
There's no whitewashing here. We all had warts. We all learned as we were doing things, and I would say that with the RCMP. I would tell you my overall experience with the RCMP was a positive one. I found them as a police force an honorable bunch. I did, and I knew many of them. Some of them I didn't like, but you know, we all had warts. And that is the answer to the question of would they likely have slaughtered all the dogs? The answer is no, I don't think so. They would have said keep the dogs and continue to hunt.
My visit to Panuktuk and everything that's happened since has been like a history lesson. In 1961, a terrible tragedy struck this region.
There was an outbreak of distemper that killed all the dogs. The Minister of Northern Affairs, Walter Dinsdale, decided to pay a visit to the north. So we chartered this small aircraft and flew into Pangnatang and arrived there to discover that all the dogs were dead. And this was a hell of a shock, of course, to everybody. So Walter Dinsdale said to me, we better get some dogs for these people, because they had nothing. I mean, they had no skidoos, no bloody dogs, nothing. So he said, can you find some dogs? So I ran around and called, checked around, and found that there were a lot of dogs in Fort Chimo, Kuujjuaq. So he said, well, go and get some. So I was given authority to charter a DC-3, and we flew down to Fort Chimo and picked up, I bought 50 dogs. And flew straight back to Pang, landed on the ice, because it was, it's ease on this DC-3. And so the 50 dogs arrived, and people were able to get out on the land. But not for long, because these dogs fell foul of distemper, and they died. So I went and got another load, and the same thing happened to them.
Out of 900 sled dogs, almost 700 died. The disaster changed the course of history in the Cumberland Sound. By accident, it sped up the government's campaign to get the Inuit into the settlement.
The Northern administration was really worried that if they didn't do something, they were going to have a case of starvation, mass starvation on their hands by March, April, the end of the winter.
So we did evacuate the people into Pangnatang. There were private aircraft and the police aircraft were going out to the communities and with about a third of a tank of gas so they could overload it with people and people's effects.
Despite the fact that the government actually wanted them to get back out to their camps as soon as possible, it doesn't happen for a whole lot of reasons. People stay in town.
The quasi-nomadic hunter lifestyle of the Inuit in the Cumberland Sound area ended with the dog epidemic. And it was the end of a way of life.
But some people resisted. They moved back to their camps and rebuilt their dog teams. It lasted only a couple of years.
1964 ngulaktillugu upenga saakku. Tikitto kharelaarsima mimman. Khangatasiumi atausiliulluni palaisikko khangatasiu. Oka yolo ta palaisimu. Oka yoyusaulortugo hallunoyaqunalaanguttugu kisiani. Kokia yoqarvalulangman. Kappeasulaarsimma yugu taisima naqatanguttigiitigu. Taannalo anaanagiya paqatituarillute. Asuilla qokianginnarvalumma qimmiiluikkuat tusaqsauvattu aannarpaluttu nillerpalut. Ittuamman paakkuta unnattorsuukkut. Qimmimminnialawi. Qimmimminnialawi. Takkuyaarukka. Tuqungahoqtaalawi. Ataatama taakkuanuna qatitta. Qimmimminnialawi. Taissimani. Aanni lahorsimavunga. Aanni arotiginnaakko akune aanni arotigillu.
Perhaps the dogs were sick. Perhaps the government just wanted people off the land. It's too late to know. But that's how the last families had to move into Paniltub. In town, they had no money and no skidoos. They still needed to hunt, so they had dogs. And sometimes the dogs got loose.
Palisi isirilluni uqaariartut qokiusiartuni. Ikkuagu qimmi ipingaartu illutta ataanimma. Illerusummakku nualaarmita qokiani armagin. Qatanguttigiitigu illerusummi nuang alilaarsimmammi qokiani arma palisi. Kappiasussinalaarillutta taima qokialaartillugu nunagiyattuni. Asuillanu angallutta qokiavaluttu illutta ataanu qimmiqulunni. Kappiaginnaayartaalugi qattalilaarsimallugi paliisikku. Pisimainartugu qokiagunnarningissarusiugama taanayaqqaamaginnaqattarsimayara.
The Mountie who was there in 1966 wrote in his report that he had shot 250 dogs that year. He alone. People were devastated.
Vi qamangani tilluti tusaqavio qanu ipinniarna mangaappi qanu.
Taimala qoqormagu palisiu isumakalilaqsimayunga. Summakkea oqaatingitiartuninga qoqersiva. Kisumi tolutti tokai isumaigaminga.
Kaui vale ali teina kin ulavang ali kaui malau semanginama. Summa kiaman teina ili palle ali kita. Summa kausigi jau vale ali.
Piak tahu nasarni kungunno. Kamagi jau nasarni kungunno. Isimakali jaksima yung ada kanya hukutama aswaru pada isiku ika jaksima kakit. Pada isiku ika jakarta jaksima kama. Kami taruh nakitsangan nattara sukatawatunga. Omayo sukatawatunga. Kami taruh nakitsangan nukukut. Tanga ika jaksima na pada isiku no imakino aswaru mikalawatunga. Taman na isimagi yung jaksima jaga sumukya kanya hukutawa.
Kalau nang usau yu mana yu ukakatanga tago Inuit kina yang mipigo matuin namu.
Tapi ada oktaw yaga semangindingit inum mata tamani nuna hatu tokau mata nuna hanga tamani. Kendingit itu tapi ada oktaw yaga semangit kalau mata pada ikundi. Inuli itu kusinga. Taman nak kina yang nutituin nawimman. Uang alik kina yang nutituin nawingin aku. Kisah ini gapa matokakku tusaku yakka Inuit kanu doktaw ni meningan Qimmit itu tak semuni tapi doktaw yaga dak semang kalau mata Inuit amma sukuluti ayok saktu tikisumi tabba Qimmit sukutaw mata tabayok satu yakkan imai pura semang mata.
The Qimmit Truth Commission spent a year hearing testimony. They heard from nearly 300 people. What did they learn?
The oral histories, the oral reports that Inuit have given us are valid, that they can be believed, that the stories we've heard of the trauma that people are experiencing today and have experienced in the past about this transition period is actually true. The archival records, the records from governments, from the RCMP, establishes that.
Tekwa anong narotibinin anitiar lugu tamang metiak diamond na iparasaman ng maturi to sa matuin naklugu nila. It really uplifts your your being when you do get an apology. I mean, even as a person to person, when one apologizes, it makes you feel a lot better, and you regain that confidence.
Inuit ask for recognition, even an apology for mistakes. Is that too much to ask?
I think we'll see that at the end of the day here. Commissioner Igliorti is wrapping up his work with the Truth Commission, and whatever recommendations he brings forward to our commissioner, I'm sure that we'll see some activity from that office. Okay. In order to move forward, as I've said, we have to uncover the past. Yeah. We have to find out what happened. We have to quell any misinformations, miscommunications. We have to have both sides understanding each other a little better. And I think that's the only way that we're going to move forward.
For more than 30 years, there were no dogs in our family. Inuit were going through difficult times. But now, even though we no longer depend on them to survive, dogs are back, and Inuit are finding their voice again. I think the two go together.
Gaba matukakun aksukadlak pingwa kadaw mata inung. Gaba matukakun inu silatange Inuit asiwa saksuting. Gaba matukakun pikuyakutiming niktaw ng ngaktuarong mi kadlo na nunangan ng ngaktuarong mi uwat tinu kahit tinasukluting. Tan makiribok taba. Gaba matukakku saw siya kilaktun ubang akawi mayatukangan nagpitakakon na ito. Isin na kurano isayaw. Saw nga raw miluki siya ni utirtinne sulaummilu kisiane utirlune atuqasugunnersiiq qallunaangurtitauna sullattaaxsimavunga nairuarsungalu qallunaanguguma nuyakkalu ajjigingillunigin uvinigalu ajjigingilluniu qallunaangurtitauna sukkuluarlunga inuugama itigartauni kuuyunga.
Dogs are howling, they're restless and they're bold. I need to be traveling my body and my soul. The world outside is bursting forth, it embraces me. I'll know that I am living when I'm on a chamuti. Chamuti, chamuti, bring me on a freedom ride. Give me a chance to understand the kind of person I am inside. Chamuti, chamuti, I can see a distant shore where there is a deeper beauty that can make my spirit soar. Yeah, yeah.
The residential schools, the dog slaughters, the relocation. We didn't understand where any of this anger or any of these issues, we couldn't understand why are we struggling as Inuit. This is why things are the way they are, but now let's move past that and build from that. It's going to be very beneficial for young people and maybe a sense of peace for the older people too that went through that.
Every day it surrounds me, but it seems a whole lot closer when I'm on a chamuti. Chamuti, chamuti, bring me on a freedom ride. Give me a chance to understand the kind of person I am inside. Chamuti, chamuti, I can see a distant shore where there is a deeper beauty